Good morning. So, another great question asked in the group under the questions thread. And sometimes it's easier for me to jump on and do a quick video because it's easier for me to explain the different aspects that I want to get across to you. So, Debbie Neville asked a question in the group this morning, and I thought I'd just jump on and do a quick video. So, Deb's question was, supposing you are with a group of friends and someone suggests you all going for fish and chips. The easy option would be to go along with it, perhaps just eat a little bit, but you just don't fancy fish and chips. What would you do? Now, I'm sure we can all relate to being in that kind of situation around food. If you're out, maybe someone suggests going somewhere like for fish and chips, and your automatic is that you don't fancy it. Certainly, if it's Christmas, we have these times where we're in groups and we feel a pressure to go along with what other people are eating. So the first thing I want you to consider there, Debs, is it a genuine that you don't fancy fish and chips, or is it linked into a food rule around fish and chips? So, I'm a big believer the more questions that we ask ourselves rather than just go with what we automatically think is going on for us can be really, really helpful. So I'm guessing this question has been asked because you've got an up and coming event and this scenario might happen for you. So obviously, to put it into some context, you're in the early stages of learning to manage your weight and your food relationship in a different way. So you're having like these different questions around experiences and situations you've been in the past. So the first question, or I would invite you, is just to be curious about what is it about the fish and chips? Is it that there is a genuine you don't fancy it because you don't really like fish and chips and you prefer to have something else? Or is it that maybe fish and chips are on your bad food list? So when you start to think about having those foods, especially if you are trying to eat healthier, that it might be kind of bringing up some fear and worry around breaking that food rule. So it's really important when we start to look at a situation, we don't just look at it in as you've presented it. So we start to look at what's going on leading up to that situation. We're then going to look at food pushers, okay? 3 things I want to cover off. One is that question up front to just kind of explore what the fish and chips really mean for you. Is it that you just don't fancy them, or is it that fish and chips are, for most people we make that assumption they're on the bad food list. And so if we're trying to be healthy with our food, the thought of eating those food could create this sort of disturbance for us and then trigger off this, like, how am I going to manage that situation? So what I also want to talk about today is food pushers and, some thoughts for how you can work with that. And also the last one around your own beliefs about not eating as part of the gang. You've got to remember, as humans, we live in tribes. We're meant to live in tribes, and the sense of belonging that we have in our tribe. So anything that we do that goes against that potential sense of belonging can also bring up some worry for us. So first question, have a think about that. The second one is food pushers. Now, we all have, my mum is an ultimate food pusher. Growing up, she was a baker, so she was always encouraging us to eat, but then criticising us if we did eat it. So very, very interesting. So food pushers are kind of the people in our lives that encourage us to finish everything on our plate, that kind of bake for us and then have this expectation if we eat it, and if we don't eat it, they get mortally offended about it. So maybe you're a food pusher. I know I have been and can be at times, especially if I've if I've cooked something nice, I want people to try it. So there's different reasons why people push food. I think one of them is that food represents love, and so people want you to try their food. I know that's a slightly different situation to the fish and chips, but we very much associate love and eating together around food. Also, people feel uncomfortable if they want to have fish and chips and you say you don't want them. They feel uncomfortable about that. They want everyone to be involved. So sometimes the way they react in situations is to do with their own uncomfortable feelings when you're declining having something. sabotage, they may be trying to sabotage you, as much as we don't want to admit that with people that are friends and family. Often that's an unconscious process where they may be trying to sabotage you. I've worked with lots of clients over the years in regards to their weight, and I have heard numerous stories of where partners and friends have bought them boxes of chocolates, so we never really know what's going on behind people's reactions and actions. So another one is, they want to share the experience. So if you're all out and in a group and most of you want to go for fish and chips, they don't want you to feel left out, and that, like I said earlier, that can promote some uncomfortable feelings for them. And also, if they're cooking, they may be a bit pushy around food because they want to get the praise that they've spent time in the kitchen, and they want to get praised for that. So there is absolutely these situations can be quite challenging, and I always come from this place of trying to be as honest as you possibly can be. So, and I'll talk more about like the emotions that come up for you when you start to say no in these sorts of situations, and how that potentially breaks the attachment of being around those people, because it's not as easy and black and white as just saying no to the fish and chips. Because food represents so much in our friendships and in our groups, there can be this almost psychological attachment that we have to the food, to the eating, and to the actual belonging and being part of that group. So how you can sort of handle food pushers is to be really honest with them. So if you're in this situation where most of them want to go for fish and chips, ultimately you could come at it from two ways. You can either try to influence what other people want to eat and what is going on there, or you can actually really focus on what it is that you need. And if it is a genuine, you don't fancy fish and chips, be okay to say to them that you guys go off and have your fish and chips, and I'm going to nip and go and get something else, and it's important to remember that the norm for you is likely to go along with what everybody else is doing. And when we start to change our patterns of behaviour, it feels awkward and it feels uncomfortable. And that is what keeps us stuck in the process of just going along what's easier for the group and for everybody else. But if you want things to change, being able to stand in your own assertiveness, in your own meeting of your own needs, and being able to say to the group, that's great, you go and have your fish and chips, but I really don't fancy them. I'm going to go and have a wander over here and go and find yourself something else. But it's really important, Debs, that if you do that you do go and find yourself something else to eat, because I know we've worked together for a little bit, because you're not just a physical being, you have your emotions. And if your emotional self feels like she's not getting food or getting something, that could create an emotional disturbance for you. So part of the process of learning to actually say no to what the masses are doing and actually follow your own desires and your own needs. So it's really important that you actually then do that, and that you manage any guilt you feel as a result of it, or any resistance to actually putting that line in the sand and saying, no, that's not right for me, I need to do what's right for me. And on odd occasions, it's okay to be flexible and it's okay to go along with things. But if change requires like stretching ourselves a little bit and doing things a little bit differently, and I'd be really honest with people, and maybe before you even get in that situation, to sort of have a conversation with your friends around where you're at with your eating, and that you are really practicing trying to give yourself permission to eat and listen to your hunger and listen to what your body really needs. And sometimes that will mean that you actually say no to some of the things that they want to do. And the more you can prep people and plan people for what it is you're doing, the less these sorts of challenges are likely to come up, or they'll have a bit more consideration to it. Because it's really easy when people suggest, oh, let's go for fish and chips, for that part of us to kind of feel a little bit like we're a bit unseen and unheard, especially if people can see that we are working on this part of our food relationship. So it is complex and it's hard to get everything across in this video. The last thing that I've dropped my notes. The last thing I kind of want to talk about is your beliefs about not eating, being part of the gang. So it takes a huge amount of bravery and courage to actually step away from what everybody else is doing. as children we want to belong, and that doesn't really change as we grow up. Of course we rebel and we do our own things, but eating is a really tribal and primitive thing to do as a group. And to go against if there were 6 of you, that what five wanted fish and chips and you didn't, to go against that is a much deeper level than just the sort of social level of saying no to fish and chips. It goes much deeper, and it has its links to attachment and that fear of not belonging in that group. So for some of us, if we have that attachment stuff going on and we fear that breach of attachment, that's more likely to keep us going along with what the group want of us. So I would also invite you to sort of think about that, Debs. Think about, and this isn't just related to food, guys, this is related to any time when someone makes a decision and you go along with it even though it's against what it is you want to be doing. And this stuff takes time to practice. So this sounds like a really nice opportunity, Debs, for you to actually practice kind of stepping away from the masses in some ways, but really important that actually you give them that information up front. You don't have to apologise for it. You just kind of don't make a big deal out of it. Just say, I really don't fancy fish and chips, but you guys crack on. I'm going to nip off and have a little wander and see what else is about. Obviously, I don't know all the nuts and bolts of where you are and stuff like that, but it is about looking at what stops you from actually saying no. And often it is that fear of upsetting them, but sometimes it's a bit more deep rooted than that. In fact, it's got its roots in that breach of attachment. What will people think? What if I'm not accepted? What if I'm excluding myself from the group? It's not really about the fish and chip situation. It's more about that deep level being different and moving away from the group, which can feel quite scary, and whilst it's quite a simplistic situation itself, I think that could be a really nice one to actually start working through that need to please and that need to be part of the gang. So hopefully that's just offered you my thoughts in terms of that situation. When we read a question out like that, on the surface it seems quite straightforward, but often there's some more deeper psychological stuff going on. So the first one would be, check in with yourself. Is it that you really don't fancy it, or could it be that fish and chips are on the bad food list, and so there's some automatic resistance to want to eat those? The second one is food pushers. Think about how you perceive that and how in the past you've normally gone along with people that are pushing food or have expectations of you eating, and how you relate to that, but also sort of give some consideration as to why they might be doing that. And then the third part is about exploring that fear that you might have about saying no, and how that might link into your sense of belonging and that sense of attachment, because that will always keep you stuck in doing those patterns, the saying yes, the people pleasing, until you can actually say, right, actually this is quite a safe situation to practice doing things a little bit differently. So any further questions on that, Debs, just let me know.